So here we are. You're a frequent contributor. I kind of roped you into this, Dr. Jed. I wanted you to be my co-host.
Well, think
And
of
then
me as your occasional co-host
occasional co-host.
that you're having a conversation with.
Yeah, that I'm having a conversation with. And I hope it is a conversation. And I hope it's actually more of a chance for you just to explore ideas, whatever's on your mind, whatever you're interested in. And I'll go there. I'm interested in what you're interested in. And you said you wanted to talk about anger. So that was a surprise. I actually it made me get out the craving mind. And one of the things that I actually had it. I had this little sticky thing already in the craving mind on the section where you talk about self-righteous anger.
No
So,
kidding.
yes.
There it is.
So, this is clearly something that you've actually been interested in for a while. You've been interested in personally for you. And you said that you're also concerned about sort of systemically that people are struggling with.
Yes. So the reason I suggested it as a topic was that I'm seeing a lot more, let's call it unforced anger. It's like, so in sports, somebody made an unforced error, and we can talk about whether anger is ever justified. I think that's also an important topic, but it just seems like there's a lot more unforced anger right now. And so it just felt like it would be a good topic to talk about, and not just to highlight it because I'm guessing everybody's seen it, but also to deeply explore where it comes from and what we can do so that we can all live better lives. So if it's helpful to start, I can just talk about, and I wrote a little bit about this in The Craving Mind, my own struggles with anger, and how I really had to see very, very deeply how unhelpful it was for me to actually be motivated to work with it. And I could give, what is it? The Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours, which is actually not that scientifically sound, but it's a nice number that, and he writes great books. So, I could say I'm an expert in anger because I've certainly had racked up the hours. And I start with that because I think you've got to know what it is that you're working with to really, really see how to work with it. And I think, so just examples, for example, I was on a month-long silent meditation retreat trying to develop concentration. And my mind kept going and going and going back to the situation I had with a colleague at work where I was angry at this person. And the anger was getting in the way of my concentration practice. And it really helped me see a couple of things really clearly. One was I was on retreat. I wasn't near this person. So me getting angry was a huge waste of energy, where, it's kind of like, if you want to drive somewhere, you don't put your car you turn the car on, put it in neutral and slam on the gas. It doesn't get you very far. And in fact, it uses up all your fuel. Well, that's basically what I was doing on retreat, was that I wanted to go somewhere. I wanted to develop concentration. And so my mind was like, well, we're driving in neutral. And guess what? We're going to make sure you don't go anywhere. And that's exactly what was happening. So that maybe gives a little context in terms of one of the places where I was seeing anger very clearly, because it was, I wasn't distracted by anything else. And I don't know if it'd be helpful maybe to color that or add to that. How do you, when I ask the question anger, are there stories that you can think of for you personally where you've just been really stuck in it?
Anger shows up in a couple of different ways for me. I mean, there's that resentment, the sort of chewing on the resentment going over and over in my head around
Mm-hmm.
something. But more often now, I experience anger as flashes of
Mm-hmm.
outward anger. So there's the
Mm-hmm.
inner anger of the resentment and the rumination and the storytelling. But then there's also the outward expression of anger. And I often tell my children that I was never an angry person until I had kids. And so for me, anger is when I don't get enough sleep when I haven't eaten enough, and there's a lot of I talk about the sort of the three S's when I'm stressed, when I'm sleep deprived, and when substances are involved. So not getting enough
Mm,
food, or if you drink too much, and I have these moments of losing it and kind of lashing out over little things. And that's the type of anger I don't really like. The rumination stuff, I feel like I have a better handle on now
mhm,
than I don't get caught in that as much. I get more sort of the flashes of emotion regulation, really. And those it feels different to me. And I think people are what I hear in my practice is people are a little bit more on edge
mhm,
and expressing their anger outwardly more. And also people are a little more entrenched in the divisive rumination, that sort of inner anger as well.
mhm. Yes. Yeah. So I think you're highlighting some of the things that I see as well in terms of these, if anger is this fire, what's fueling that fire. So I don't know if it would be helpful then, I'd be curious to hear how you have been kind of exploring the origins, like where does that fire come from. I can start, but it'd
Mhm.
be, maybe we could start there. And I think of this from a, putting on my science hat. I want to understand a mechanism before I can actually develop a treatment to test that and see if we can work with the mechanism. It's kind of like a cancer treatment, where in the old days they used to have these chemotherapeutics that it was basically like throwing a hand grenade in your body, and you try to kill as all the cancer cells before you kill yourself, with the medicine. And so they had tremendous side effects. The cure rates were much lower than they are today, where you can find a molecular mechanism. You can do a whole genome sequence. And my friend who's an oncologist does this with all his patients, where he can sequence their entire genome and figure out exactly where the mutations are, and then target those pathways so they can get much better remission and cure rates with many fewer side effects. So I think behaviorally we can approach life in the same way. And mechanistically, I think of, what are the causes, what fuels anger. And I think two places that I've seen pretty clearly, and in my own, outpatient clinic practice, has been it's basically two flavors of the same thing. One is when we don't get what we want. So let's say somebody cuts in front of us at the grocery store. We didn't, and well, that's actually getting something that we don't want is the other one. So somebody cuts in front of us at the grocery store, we get something that we didn't want. We didn't want somebody to cut in front of us, or somebody cuts us off in traffic, or somebody does something, on the road that we are not expecting. We don't want that, and we can get anger, road rage, type things like that. Not getting what we want can also make us angry, and I think that also comes in this spectrum of, we can get, if we're trying to solve a problem, get something done, get somebody to come along with us. It's like, hey, I want you to, let's say we're having a discussion with somebody and we want them to see our point of view, or we have a strong sense that we want them to believe what we have to say, or trust it. Let's say, one of the conversations that I've seen too much, unfortunately, is, the vaccine conversations, where somebody's really, two sides are very entrenched. One is, I really think vaccines are helpful, and as a public health servant, that's the side that I tend to fall onto. And then there are others that are like, hey, I don't know if I don't know if the risk of the long-term effects of the vaccines have not been studied, so I'm just going to wait this one out, and and whatever. So those two sides, regardless of where somebody is on either side, doesn't even matter when it comes to anger. If one side says, "Hey, I want you to believe me," and the other side is not buying it, then they didn't get something that they wanted. And so it can start with irritation, then frustration, and it's like the thermometer gets higher and higher as that heats up, because we're not getting what we want. And that can be fed by the other side doing the same thing, saying, well, I want you to believe me. So those two flavors, not getting what we want and getting something that we didn't want, tend to have pretty good explanatory power for a lot of anger that I see. What's your sense?
I think I would add on to that, that one of the ways that I see anger playing a role in a positive way as well, again, it's about I think it's a lot of it also has to do with how you express it, is around protecting something that you value or something that you care about, which is kind of
Mhm.
linked to that not getting something that you want, but maybe it moves us from toddlers having a tantrum of, "I didn't get what I want," into actually, "This is something I really care about, and because I care so much about it, it makes me angry."
Mhm.
And then I end up acting in a way that's actually out of alignment with my values, trying to protect my values, which is the discrepancy that I think, shows up and that doesn't feel good. And for me, when I'm working with folks, I also look at anger as energy. And actually, I had a conversation with Larry Ward, who's a good family friend. He was a lay minister for Thich Nhat Hanh,
Mm.
and very close with Ty, traveled with him all over the world, doing days of mindfulness with him. And he actually, his house was firebombed. He's a Black man in an interracial relationship. And in the 90s, his house was firebombed. And so I talked to him about anger. I mean, if anyone has a right to be angry, right? He talked about anger as being energy, and then how did he manage that energy when that happened? And what he
Mhm.
did with it was he actually went to Plum Village. He spent a lot of time with Thich Nhat Hanh sitting in silence. He went into nature, and then he dedicated much of his life to uh, social justice through mindfulness, right?
Mhm.
So that's a way of taking the energy and transforming it. But really, what's underneath it is something that he cared about.
Mhm.
And so that's another aspect of the getting what I want and what not getting what I want, and something being, taken from me, I guess.